All right, we're working on the answers for worksheet 1-7. Now, this one, I had to use the actual textbook worksheet because it's difficult to turn off the bar lines automatically appearing in Finale, and I didn't want to spend the time sorting that out. So all the bar lines are in place. I'm just going to remind you of the math because basically that's what the rhythms are. And you'll notice if you compare this to the worksheet, the note heads are different. That's because after I talk about the rhythms, you're going to hear essentially hear the rhythms played, and you're welcome, since you're doing this in the privacy of your home, to try to either tap and match the rhythms or sing along, what have you. And you can spend as much or as little time as you want on this. All right, so here's the math. Quarter note is worth a beat. We are in a meter 2/4, which means 2 beats, then a bar line. 4 stands for this guy, a quarter note. Of course, that's not a typical note head. All right, so we have 1 beat, bar line. We reached the 2. Half beat, 1 beat, bar line. Quarter beat, quarter beat, and a beat, bar line. Half note's worth 2 beats, so bar line. 2 halves, bar line. 4 quarters and 1 beat, bar line. Now, this next one is the first time for many of you that you might have seen a 3/4, but this is a 3/8, which means every time we have 3/8 notes in terms of rhythms, bar line. So these will seem like shorter measures because they're using smaller rhythms. There are 2/8 notes in a quarter note, so we're 2/3 of the way there. There's an 8th note, bar line. 16th notes are now half of a beat. So 2 halves and 2 beats, because remember there's 2/8 notes in a quarter note. We have bar line. We have 1 beat in this 8th note, 2 halves in these 16ths, and 1 more beat in this, bar line. 32nd notes are like 16th notes in a simple meter, so all 4 of these take place in the span of a single 8th note. There are 2 8th notes locked in that quarter note, so bar line. 2 halves, a beat, 2 halves, bar line. The dotted quarter is the biggest rhythm in 3/8. It's a beat plus a half, so that's a total of 3/8. Now here's the more familiar cousin, 3/4. We have 1 beat, a half note worth 2, bar line. 2 beats tied up in the half note, 2 halves, bar line. 2 halves, beat, 2 halves, bar line. 2 beats, 2 halves, bar line. 4/16 equal a beat, beat 2, beat 3, bar line. Beat 1, beat 2 and 3 tied up in the half note. Now here's an asymmetric meter. We talked about 5/4 was one of the first to be popularized because of the jazz group, the Dave Brubeck trio, and he actually, it might have been a quartet because it had a sax and 3 rhythm. But anyway, the 5/4 was used in their hit Take 5. All right, so we have 1 beat, 2 beats in the half note, 2 more beats, so that's 5 beats, bar line. Dotted half, that's 3 beats plus 2 beats, bar line. Quarter plus 2/8, quarter, 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 so that's a total of 4 quarters, 2/8, that's 5, that's a bar line. 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, the C stands for common time, which is 4/4, because it is the most common in Western European music. And in EDM, it dominates the landscape. All right, so 3 beats here. There's beat 4, bar line. 2 halves, 1 beat, 2 beats, bar line. 4 quarters of a beat. 16th notes are each one is a quarter of a beat. 2 halves, 2 half 1 quarter note bar line. 2 halves, 2 halves, 2 beats, bar line. 3 beats and 2 halves, bar line. 2 and 2, there's 4. Now, part of the reason also that I had to use was that these meters are in place, whereas that's what you're supposed to supply. Now, the reason why you don't see 4/4 here is when a meter is introduced and it was changed here, it became 4/4 or common time. It's good until it's changed, so that's why it's unnecessary here. And this funny guy is the drum clef. Doesn't look like the treble, doesn't look like the bass. Drummers are unique. Now, it does say that more than, and I'll try to give you several answers when there's multiple answers. All right, this one, there aren't typically multiple answers. That's 2 beats there and 4 beats there, has to be 6/4. Now, we have 2 eighth notes beamed together, 4 sixteenths beamed together, that's 2/4, but this, if you wrote 4/8, that's also correct. Here we have 4 sixteenths, that's 1 beat, and then 2 eighths, that's 3 beats, but if you wrote 6/8, that would also be correct. Here we have just a beat and a half plus a half beat, that's 2/4, but if you wrote 4/8, that still applies to this one, either 2/4 or 4/8. On this one, pretty self-explanatory. 3/8, and that's exactly what you see. Here we've got an asymmetric meter. 4/8 notes are tied up in the half note. 2/8 are inside that quarter note, and one more. That's a total of 7. Here we have 2/8, so 2 sixteenths equal 1/8. We've got an eighth. 3/4. This 1/4, believe it or not, would also be acceptable for this one. This one has a beat in the 2 eighth notes, a beat and a half, and an eighth note. That's 3/4, but 6/8 is acceptable. Same here for this dotted half, 3/4 or 6/8. C stands for common time, 4/4, 3 beats in the dotted half, and then that makes beat 4. Here we've got 3 pairs of eighth notes. That's 3/4 or 6/8. Here we've got 4 eighth notes, 4 sixteenths, quarter, all that adds up to 4 beats. Here we've got 2 beats and 3 more, so there's 5, and here's the toughest of the bunch at the end. 7/16, it means the 16th gets the beat. There are 2 sixteenths in the eighth, 1 there, so that's 3 sixteenths, 4 sixteenths there, so 7/16 is the answer. All right, so now I'm going to just simply fire it up, and this is going to be a preview of what you'll be doing in Unit 2, where you'll be performing along with the rhythm. It just starts out, so try to catch up. The cursor will let you know where you are, and like I said, you can rewind the video and go over this as much or as little as you want. All right, that's all for that one.